The 5 new Reform UK MPs made their first appearance in the Commons yesterday.
And in his first speech, leader Nigel Farage pointed out his party's lack of experience.
We are the new kids on the block. We have no experience in this Parliament whatsoever, even though some of us have tried many times over the years previously to get here.
One of those MPs is party chairman, former leader Richard Tice, who joins us now. It will only happen once to have the first ever day in the House of Commons as a Member of Parliament.
It was
that day yesterday.
It was remarkable. It was like a first day at school. Slight trepidation. Have you remembered the pen? Will the IT work? Where do I go? I mean, you know, the Commons, it's like an absolute maze. But very exciting. I had to slightly pinch myself. I mean, it was my third go at trying. It was Nigel's eighth. So, but we're delighted. And I think it's fair to say we're going to make a lot of noise.
On the TV, it always looks big, but it's not big, is it?
It's not big. It's actually very small. It can really only take about 400 people. So to try and squeeze 600 plus in there is very, very cosy indeed. We were sort of standing room only, but it was a real moment. It was very special.
Your party got a huge number of votes, 4 million across the board, only 5 MPs as a result. But you were responsible for getting rid of a huge number of Conservative MPs and candidates. Well, you say that kind of sarcastically.
It's called competition.
Yeah,
I mean,
but what it's resulted in is a Labour government, whereas you would imagine that ideologically you're closer to the Tories. And in fact, in 2019, you stood down a whole load of candidates in order to prevent a Labour government. So why the switch?
Well, because then we had to get Brexit done, and we trusted Boris Johnson and the Tories at their word. They betrayed us all on multiple things, whether it was Brexit, whether it was immigration, whether it was taxation. They basically became like socialists. High tax, high regulation, nanny state, mass immigration.
And you think that the Labour Party...
There's no difference between the two of them.
Are less socialist?
What's interesting is actually there was no attraction to the Labour Party either. I mean, they ended up 10 points less than the polls were showing.
They got a massive landslide majority and are now the
because of our ridiculous electoral system. People can't work it out. Hang on, you got 4.1 million votes, a few 100,000 more than the Lib Dems. They ended up with 72 MPs and we've ended up with 5. What sort of daft electoral system is that?
OK, but it's the electoral system that we operate under. It is, and it's the electoral system which you stood in.
Correct, but if you want to trust democracy, and if you want more than 60% of the people to vote, you've got to have an electoral system that people trust and engage with. Where you've got PR, average turnout's about 75, 80%.
But we haven't got PR. So what I'm asking is, was your aim to destroy the Conservatives because you took a very different tack this election than the last general election? Was your aim to elect a Labour government because you knew which system you were operating under?
Our aim was to present to the British people a proper, common-sense series of policies, and guess what? Actually, word spread and people in their millions decided to vote for us. That's a great thing for democracy. We're getting huge traction amongst young people, and I think everyone's the winner. We've got a bridgehead in Parliament, and as we head towards the next general election, we're going to be fighting in county elections, local elections. You know, our aim is to be at the next general election, to be the opposition to socialism.
Just to understand, so both parties are the same. Opposition to socialism, spending the big state. So the decision you are making politically in this Parliament is for reform to be the smaller state, the lower tax, to the right of the Conservative Party. You're going to take on the Tories politically.
Well, we're going to take on both of them because they're both forms of high tax, high regulation, big state, no growth, pro the job-destroying, economy-destroying net zero, pro-mass immigration that's making everybody poorer, reducing our quality of life, all of these things. And it's right that the British people have a proper choice, and that's what we put forward, and that's what we will continue to drive for.
But there is a strategic choice for you here, because you can appeal to disgruntled Conservatives saying they're not a real Conservative party, or you can appeal to disgruntled Labour voters in Labour seats, saying you aren't a proper Labour party. And we discussed this in the election campaign with Nigel about tax policy. He was saying your tax policy was going to help the lowest paid. When the analysis was done, the biggest gainers in cash and percentage terms from your tax policy were people who had above average incomes. The biggest gainers were the top 9%
Nonsense.
Well, it's just true. And if you look at your inheritance tax proposal, raising the threshold from 1 million to 2 million, that doesn't help Labour people. It helps Conservative people.
Nonsense.
How are you going to...
Nonsense. We would have freed up 7 million people from paying any income tax whatsoever. You've got to make work pay throughout the whole...
But I'm just giving you the facts. The facts
are
that the bigger gains were people on higher incomes and the smaller gains were people on lower incomes.
Nonsense. We would have freed up 7 million people from paying any income tax.
You want the lowest nonsense to facts. It's just a fact. It's not my fact.
It is a fact that we would have freed up...
The IFS and the IPPR said your tax policy...
Left-wing think tanks that didn't want us to do well.
The
seriously, we would have freed up 7 million people...
Is everybody left-wing who doesn't agree with you?
Isn't it right that you want to make work pay and make risk pay for everybody, all the way up the spectrum?
Yeah, but the gains were bigger for people on higher incomes.
We almost won Llanelli.
Are you telling me I'm wrong when I say the bigger gains on tax were for people who are richer?
The reality is...
So, but are you telling me I'm wrong?
What I'm saying is the people who benefit the most proportionately are those on the lowest incomes. No. They were very attracted by our income rate. That's why we did
the facts say in cash and proportional terms, the biggest gains were people who are on the higher incomes.
We want to motivate people all the way up the whole spectrum.
I know you do.
But the people who are most appealing and attracting...
is, are you trying to appeal to
richer,
disgruntled Tories? Your tax policies do. So do you want to say to Labour, no, we can do spending and helping the poor better?
We're appealing to everybody across the spectrum, including the young. Isn't it interesting? Lots of school debates went on last week, and we were winning loads and loads of school debates because they wanted conviction, they wanted personality, they want people to actually, say what they believe in. So I think we're making great progress across the whole space, but we are coming for the Labour Party. Look how well we did in many of the industrial heartlands, the traditional Labour areas. We came second to Labour.
For the Labour Party because they're too socialist or they're not socialist enough?
Because they don't represent actually opportunity and reward hard work for people in the industrial heartlands. And that's why we're making real...
Is Labour going to spend too much or too little?
Oh, well, I think Labour will spend too much. There'll be no growth. They're obsessed with net zero, which will kill jobs, which will kill automotive and steel industries and other industries. And if you have no growth and you have mass immigration, guess what? We all get poorer.
So you're going to appeal to Labour voters. You're going to come for Labour by telling disgruntled Labour voters they're spending too much, and if we spent less, that would be better for you.
What you need growth. You've got to make work pay for those on lowest incomes, low pay. That's what we're about. That's a whole economic policy.
If I know. See, it's different now because you did well in the election, but you didn't win that many seats, but you did well. But you've got a decision on message now.
Yeah,
and honestly, I don't know what your message is.
It's very simple.
You're going to say to Labour voters they're too socialist
because
and they're
we're
spending too much.
politicians and we know we're right. The message is exactly the same. It won't change. We don't drift around with the wind like all these other politicians. We actually know what we're talking about. We believe in it.
Maybe I'm, kind of ignorant, but I'm just confused by it.
Why are you confused with the concept?
Well, I don't know what your message...
Why are you confused with the idea of freeing up 7 million people? You're going to tell Labour voters they're spending too much? Labour voters, traditional Labour voters, do not want mass immigration to make people poorer and to reduce the quality of life.
They want good quality public services, don't they? But with investment, and of course, immigration supports our public services.
Well, hang on. If you have a huge population increase, then you put unsustainable pressure on housing rents, up 20% in over 2 years. Who does that affect? The lowest paid, the youngest the most. That's why we're making progress. If you have too much pressure on the healthcare system, it can't cope. We know we've got a healthcare problem.
We know the NHS or social care system couldn't cope without the immigrants who work for both of those systems as well.
If you have unsustainable population pressure, then you've got massive pressure on all our public services. What we've got to do is train up and skill up our own people. That's how we used to do it, and guess what? It worked, and we had real economic growth in the 80s and 90s.
OK.
2.5% plus.
Can I talk to you about candidates? Obviously, in the run-up to the election, you had some slightly awkward moments with candidates. You had to drop 3 of them.
As did every party. The Greens dropped 10. No one reported that, for example.
Well,
I don't think the other parties subcontracted their vetting to a private company.
Actually, you're completely wrong there. Lots of parties use outsource vetting companies, and ours let us down.
Vetting their candidates? Well,
yes.
Well, the Conservatives and the Labour Party don't.
Well, my understanding is that they do in certain areas. We did. We brought in a professional firm and they didn't deliver. Simple as that. They didn't perform according to the contract.
So 3 of the candidates were dropped following reports that they'd made offensive or racist comments, and also...
And the vast, vast majority of our candidates were brilliant and did really well, including... And all of them, by the way, are real people.
Right, and I want to talk to you about that.
It's absurd suggestion, honestly.
What went wrong with... Let's talk about this one particular candidate, Mark Matlock, because if you look at his campaign material, you'll see his photograph does not look real. And in fact, when you compare it to Mark Matlock, the real person, it doesn't really look like Mark Matlock. But this is one of the reasons that people wondered, never mind the quality of the candidates that you dropped, never mind the quality of other candidates, 41 of whom are friends with the fascist leader on Facebook. But this particular individual had to defend himself.
All you had to do was look at his Twitter feed.
I did look at his Twitter feed.
This is the lefties.
Yeah.
Who can't believe we did so well, and they still permeate nonsense and lies and fibs.
I looked at Mark Matlock's Twitter feed, and in response to these accusations, he said to all of those people on Reddit wondering if I'm real or if Reform has fake candidates, keep smoking the crack pipe and wondering what sexuality you are. How do you think anyone could be nominated if you don't exist?
Have you heard of a sense of humour? On the night of the election...
Is that a reasonable response to people saying, can you just tell us who you are?
Why not just look back to the night of the election when the guy was in hospital?
You just told me to look at his Twitter feed.
Yeah,
so
and you clearly didn't look back to the night of the election when he was in hospital with pneumonia.
Yeah, I have looked at that,
there you are.
Unfortunately, I will not be attending the count tonight as I have pneumonia.
So a guy who's got pneumonia, right, who's tweeted that, all of a sudden the lefties and the libs, they're all saying he's not a real... I mean, honestly, this is pathetic. They're just jealous because we did so well and we got more votes than the Lib Dems.
No, I think they were just concerned because when you look at the
concerned about him in his pneumonia?
When you look at the photograph,
you can't stand the fact that we did so well.
It's all these lefties. It's all these lefties at the Institute of Fiscal Studies.
Can't stand the fact that we did really well, and so they can't say, "Oh, they're not even real people." I mean, get a grip.
All these lefties at the Institute of Fiscal Studies on their crackpots wondering about their sexuality.
Crack pipes. Indeed.
You can't stand it, can you? The fact that we did well because we've got the right economic policies to make the country grow again. There's no growth. We're heading south, and that's what's important. And that's why we're doing so well. And that's why we'll continue to do, particularly amongst the lowest paid and the young.
When you say we can't stand it, we congratulated you. I mean, you know, you won your seat, well done.
We are journalists who are responsible for asking you questions on behalf of viewers, OK? That's what happens when you become an MP. What were you going to say? Put your crack pipe away.
Yeah, put your crack pipe away.
Yeah, sorry. I've got to stop questioning my sexuality.
It's called a sense of humour. And I think it's great that we've got real people, real candidates with a real sense of humour. Isn't it good? That's what real life is. It's what happens down the pub.
Real journalists. Can I also just ask, when we interviewed Nigel Farage, he basically said that, you want to see the end of the Conservative Party. Is that the aim? Is it about destroying the Conservatives and taking over?
Well, look, the reality is they don't represent what people thought conservatism does represent. They don't own the philosophy of conservatism. They might have hijacked it for 100 years, but competition's a good thing. If you don't perform, guess what? Someone else is going to come and eat your lunch.
I think that is true, but can I just ask you, we had an election, and we have a Labour government with a majority. As a result of that election, do you wish them well?
With less votes than Jeremy Corbyn got in December 19.
Do you wish them well?
Look, on behalf of the country, we've got huge challenges.
Sure.
And, of course, we want whoever is the government of the day to do their best to help this country go forward.
So you do wish them well?
Obviously, we will be holding them to account in areas where we think they are failing to do the best job on behalf of the British people.
I just think, when I heard Nigel Farage on the night saying we're coming for Labour, you thought to yourself, well, actually, what Ed Davey or Rishi Sunak will do is they will say, look, we lost the election, like you did, and the Labour Party won the election, and we wish them well. But, of course, we're going to hold them to account, and if they fail, then we're going to beat them in the next election. I just wondered whether you have the same view of democracy.
Of course we have the same view of democracy.
So you do wish them well?
Of course. Look, the point is, we wish
They won and you lost.
Well, we wish anybody well running the country. But you know what it's like when you're in the punch and judy of British politics. You've been there at the heart of it, Ed. OK, it's a competitive game, and that's what we do, and that's why we're doing so well.
And finally, you ruling out any merger with the Tories?
Don't do that.
We're here a few days after the election.
Yes.
We're not talking to the Tories. We're not interested in the Tories. I mean, frankly, they're yesterday's story. We're the future. That's what we're doing. That's what we're progressing. We're growing. We're looking at the May elections. We're going to do really well in those.
So, no, you wouldn't join the Tories. You'd rule out a merger. It's Reform separate from the Tories all the way.
We resisted all of that nonsense. We proved everybody wrong. We thought we'd do a deal with it. We're done with it.
Look, I'm so sorry. I'm confused again. So
you're very confused this morning.
I'm very confused. So you are ruling out any coming together of you and the Conservatives, or you're not ruling out?
I heard that you were ruling it out in your answer.
Well, what's not clear? I left the Tories. We're not interested in the Tories. We're Reform. We're growing. We stood in every seat possible in the election, and that's what we're going to continue
But
to
don't you want the Conservative Party basically...
I want to compete. That's what we want to do. We want to put forward a completely
I thought
different
the whole
agenda
point
to
of
socialism.
reform,
No,
the Canadian example, was to take over from the Tories.
To put a different agenda to socialism, which the main two parties represent at this election. We need a high growth, low tax, small state, right, freezing immigration, scrapping net zero. That's what we stand for, and will continue to stand for. And that's completely different from the two main parties that represent some form of socialism.
That was definitely the clearest thing you said today.
Richard Tice,
Lovely
thank
to
you
see
very much indeed.
Thank you.
We'll go back to our crack pipes.